What makes a hero? Strength or skill? Courage or cunning? Abraham, Moses, Noah, Rahab, these heroes weren't distinguished by brain or brawn. They didn't trust in themselves. Instead, they took a leap trusting God. If you want to be a hero, quit trying to be a hero on your own and trust the one hero all the others are pointing to, Jesus. What really makes a hero is faith.
Impact offering this weekend. We do that once a month. It is your opportunity to support a mission directly. You know, we have missions that we support on a regular basis that comes out of a part of our offerings. 10% or more goes to missions, and so we're glad to do that. But once a month we take up an offering for a specific cause or a new situation or a need that arises, and we share that with you. And today the impact offering goes to Cassie Stanfield's new ministry, Save the Moms. It's a part of Nema Village in Kenya. They're working with the Maasai people and specifically training midwives in birthing procedures to save the moms. The rate of death for moms giving birth there is crazy high, and they're trying to make a difference. And Cassie has a just young lady that grew up here, didn't have training in that, but has studied and prepped, and they're training now, and she has a crazy big vision as to what she wants to see God do through that. So if you got $1 or whatever you've got that you'd like to throw into the gray basket on your way out that says impact on it, all that money will go to the ministry, Save the Moms. Cassie's a CPA, and she's not taking any of the money for herself. It all goes straight into that ministry effort. So if you want to do that today, that's an exciting opportunity to be a part of. And it's timely for this week to be celebrating something to do with moms and birthing. So much has gone on this week in our country in regards to that, with Roe v. Wade being overturned in the Supreme Court, and the reaction and response to all of that. I'm just going to tell you up front, we as a church are wholeheartedly, unapologetically pro-life, complete. I believe that life is an incredible gift from God. And it's something that is to be revered. All life, everybody's life, moms, babies, everybody's life. I understand how people who don't know of option, or who think sometimes they don't have an option in the midst of a crisis, a young mom, for instance, becoming pregnant and not knowing how she's going to take care of a baby, or shame, or whatever, anything. I understand sometimes how that leads them down that pathway. I don't agree with that choice. I think life is the right choice, but I see how that happens sometimes in young people's lives, or anybody's life. But our country's got such a large portion of people right now that are vehemently pushing for abortion, for the right to constitutional. It's not constitutional. That's what that decision was this week. It's not a constitutional right to take the life of an unborn child. And there's such passion about that, protecting that, and for some reason, like we as Christians who are pro-life, we need to love the moms. We need to help in the situation with the babies, and with adoption and with fostering and all of those things. And we try to do that, and we try to celebrate the value of life. Let me tell you this morning, we're going to try in some way to celebrate this story with you, but something just happened in the end of second service that was amazing today. We had a young lady who's 11 years old that was baptized at the end of second service by her mother. She showed me the paperwork. 11 years ago today, she was scheduled to abort that young girl. God stepped in and intervened. There was, just no other explanation, but she missed her train ride to Chicago and didn't make the appointment. And her little girl's alive. Her mom wrapped her arms around her and said, "I'm glad you didn't go." And she baptized her this morning. That's pretty amazing. So, I know God has a plan. God has a plan for life, and we need to celebrate that. I want to pray, though, this morning because there is such turmoil. Heavenly Father, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of tension in our world. The battle between right and wrong and good and evil and life and death rages as it has for a long time. Father, we thank you that you gave us life, that you give to all of us life, that life is a gift from you and it's eternal. Father, when you breathed life into Adam and Eve, it set into motion this incredible thing that we as human beings have, an opportunity to dwell in your presence forever and to be able to experience heaven. Father, I pray that we would always hold with high regard this incredible gift of life. Lord, we celebrate all life. We help those and help us to do a better job of it. Help those who are struggling in the midst of this life. Help them to have hope. Help them in practical, real ways that we can make a difference in their life so they can endure and see the value of life. And thank you for stories like we experienced in our second service here today, where you remind us of your divine plan, that you create us, you knit each and every one of us together in our mother's womb, that you set eternity in our hearts. Father, thank you for working that plan in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hebrews chapter 11 this morning. We're going to finish up this tour of the great walk of the hallway of faith, looking at the different portraits of people who, man, I've noticed, haven't you? They're not perfect people by any means. They're flawed people who make a lot of mistakes, but they chose to do something by faith, and God honors that faith. He calls us to have faith like that. And so we're going to look through the rest of this section today, beginning in verse 32 into chapter 12, the early parts of chapter 12. And we have worked our way through characters one at a time, looking at them, developing, going back and looking at their stories. And we get to this section where the writer says, I just don't have enough time to tell you about all the people I want to tell you about. And when I read that in verse 32, I thought, now this is not a new problem we preachers have, having more to say than the time will allow. You wonder why we go on and on and on the way we do. There's just so much that we want to say. And the writer of Hebrews is experiencing the same thing. I wish I could tell you more, he says. So what he does in saying that is set us up when we try to teach this passage for utter failure. It's unless you know the stories or are willing to go back and read the stories, you're not going to understand a lot of the context for what we're doing today. And I'm going to try to give you references where you can jot these down and go back and read the story of the characters that we're mentioning. But these are some inspirational, courageous stories of people who did amazing things by faith. Now, I get the time thing, though. I really do. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, we've been blessed here at Christ Church with our teaching team developing and having so many opportunities for different people to preach. And I've been able to set out there. I mean, there were years when I just set out and listened to a sermon maybe once or twice a year. I mean, years ago, right? But now, like half the time, I'm listening to a sermon. I sympathize with you all. And just to be honest with you, I'm not sure why you come every week. No, I'm kidding. But keep doing it, okay? I mean, we're not near as funny as we think we are. That's one thing I've learned. Right? You laugh out of sympathy. You don't laugh because it's really that funny. You laugh because you recognize we think we are. We're not near as creative or intellectual as we sometimes want to propose to be. We don't have as many things to say as we often say. I mean, I just said, not that Matt doesn't do a good job or Andrew or any of them, don't you go and tell them that. It's just the reality, right? We oftentimes, we punish you and you have more going on than the bum can allow, right? And you just check out. So let me give you some instruction on that. Here's what I've noticed. It helps to have a Bible. It helps to have a paper Bible if you got one. I know it's old school, but I think a paper Bible works better. But there are advantages to the to the electronic version because you can look at a lot of things and pretend to be reading Scripture. Yeah, I know, you're scrolling through stuff. But now some of you Google up things that we say to see if that's accurate. I guess that's not a bad idea. So there's a little interaction going on there. But I think a paper Bible is really good. It benefits you to take notes, to write things down. I mean, it helps to keep you engaged and paying attention and to remember. And I know some people, they write things down because they'll come up to me and say, well, you preached that text 17 years ago because I put the date by it right here in my Bible. I say, well, whoop-de-doo, right? You expect me to never repeat anything? I'm going to repeat that one again in 17 more years, so just stay tuned, right? It's coming back. But, they write this thing. There's some people who do that. They write down by every text the date that we're preaching from that. That's an interesting thing. I don't even know when I preached these things last, right? It may have been last week. I forgot. But taking notes is helpful. Like today, I'm going to give you a bunch of Bible references, and I would encourage you to jot some of that down and go read these stories. Because I guarantee you there are going to be some names or some stories that you don't remember the full detail of, right? And so that's a helpful thing. So pay attention. And when you do fall asleep, my dad used to fall asleep in every sermon. Even when he would come here to hear me, bless his heart, they always sat over here. He and Mom always sat over there, and she'd try to keep him awake, but then she'd just give up. She'd try to keep him from getting deep enough asleep that he'd snore, but she just let him go, and his head would bob. And I want to tell you something. I see some of you do that. Here's what you need to do if you do fall asleep. Kind of go with it for a little bit. And then when you wake up, raise your head up and kind of mumble amen. And then the people around don't know if you were sleeping or maybe they were just praying, right? Overcome by the Lord, and you were just engaged in praying, and we're all good with that, right? All right, let's jump in. The reason preaching takes so long is we waste a lot of time doing things that are unimportant, like I just did. Verse 32. What more shall I say? I don't have time to tell about Gideon. That's the first one that he mentions. Jesus is better is the theme of all of this. Jesus is better is the theme of Hebrews. He's better than the old covenant. The way that we now have through Jesus to have a relationship with God is better than the old system that was established with Moses at Mount Sinai when he got the Ten Commandments, where you had to obey these in order for God to be with you and dwell amongst you. Now we have what comes through God, through His grace and mercy in Jesus, the gift of God coming to dwell in us. We have a personal relationship with Christ. You and I have direct access to God the Father because Jesus has paved the way. Our sins are not just rolled ahead or pushed away, but they are gone. So the relationship you and I can have with God the Father can be perfect and personal. It can be direct and intimate. That's what He intends for us. And the writer of Hebrews is telling us that's so much better than the way it could have been or it used to be. In the old covenant, you had to offer sacrifices all the time with your sin. Now you've got Christ, a better sacrifice. And He says it's once and for all. You used to have to go through a man, a priest, in order to get to God. And now He says we have Jesus, the great high priest. No need for a man to be an intercessor any longer, but we have direct access to the Father. So He's been building that case of how much better it is now in Christ. And He's going to tell you about these people who lived by faith. Gideon. Do you remember that story? If you want to go back and read it, it's in Judges chapter 6. Gideon is the one who's facing the army of the Midianites that camped around the Israelites. The Bible tells us there was 120,000 of them. Gideon calls together an army. He's got 32,000. That's about 4-to-1 odds. And God looks at Gideon and He says, listen, if you engage in battle, even if I help you, you will think by your own cunning and craftiness and skills of your warfare that possibly you won this battle on your own. You got too many men, Gideon. And so he begins to winnow down that number, and he ends up with just 300. 300. Now, I know there's a movie, 300, right? I went to the place where that movie was made about what happened with the Spartans, okay? We're not talking about 300 mighty warriors who might have a chance to survive. Those guys all died, right, in that battle. We're talking about 300 who take a torch and a jar to cover it and a trumpet to blow. And they encircle the Midianites at night, God's instruction. They break the jars, they hold up the lamp, they blow the trumpet, they shout for the Lord, and God causes a confusion amongst the Midianites. And they turn on each other, thinking that the other person next to them in the darkness of night is the enemy, and they slay each other there in the valley. And an army of 300 wins the victory. God does, right? Why would you engage in a battle with that kind of odds? It has to be incredible faith. And what we're going to see as we go through this section today is that faith we've been talking about action as a result of faith. Faith is specifically going to be noted as being courageous. Gideon had the courage to stand against the army because he trusted the victory that God would bring. So let me tell you about Gideon, he says, or Barak. Do you remember that story? That's a little more obscure, maybe. Judges chapter 4. Barak is a story. He is sent to battle Sisera and his 10,000 men. Sisera was the commander of the chariot division. So kind of think like tanks. So Barak is told to go and fight against the tank division led by Sisera. And of course, God's going to bring the victory. And how that happens in the end is Sisera slips off as they're losing the battle. He goes to find safe refuge. He listens to a seductive lady named Jael who says, hey, come into my tent. I'll take care of you. I'll provide a little bit of warmth for you, some warm drink and a place to lay down. You look tired. You need to rest. And so when he falls asleep, sweet woman that she was takes a tent peg. She puts it on his temple. She nails him to the ground. He dies, right? He's dead. God provides the victory. That's the story of Barak. They engage this powerful enemy in faith. Then there's Samson. Let me tell you about Samson. He says, I wish I could give you the details. Man, Samson's story. Incredible faith, fighting the Philistines. God's given him strength. He's fulfilling this vow as a Nazirite where he has this uncut hair and he's, empowered by God to encounter the enemy, and God's bringing victory, but he has a weakness. He likes women, lots of them, particularly Delilah, Philistine lady. He's caught in her lair, and she drags him in, and she ends up cutting off his hair. You remember the story? He goes through the whole process, cuts off his hair. He loses his strength. The Philistines come in. He's blinded. He's bound. He's tied to a wheel to grind. He's grinding. When he repents, his hair begins to grow out over time. God gives him strength back. He's brought for display in a Philistine celebration. They're taunting God. They're taunting Samson, and he's tied up between two pillars in their building. And God gives him supernatural strength once again. And in one final act, he pulls the pillars. The building falls down. 3,000 die there in that moment. Samson wasn't perfect, far from perfect, but he acted in faith. And then there's Jephthah. Judges chapter 11. You really need to go back and read that story. This one was the most unfamiliar to me. And as I went back and restudied Jephthah, I'm going to be honest with you, I struggled to figure out why he's here. Right? He's an Israelite whose dad engaged in relations with a prostitute, and he was conceived. So his mom was a prostitute, and because of that, the family kind of shuns him and pushes him out, and he's out living kind of in the wilderness, and he becomes a mighty warrior, and people go to serve with him. He's fighting battles, but they shun him. The Israelites shun him until they need him, and they need his assistance. And so they bring him in, and he fights a battle for them. And in the midst of that battle, he does a stupid thing. He makes a vow that if God will deliver them, he will give, when he returns home, he will give the first thing that comes out of his house as a sacrificial offering to the Lord. Well, what's going to come out of your house? Right? I mean, if you're lucky, maybe your cat or something, but just kidding. We have a cat at our house now. I thought that never would happen, but it has happened, and it's pretty sweet. So, what do you think is going to come out of your house, though, folks? Huh? Your couch isn't going to walk out of your house or something that you want to get rid of. No, it has to be something that's alive. His only daughter comes out of the house. And I'm stretching here because I don't understand this. But according to the culture, I've been told and read that he kept the vow of sacrificing his daughter because God had provided them victory. Now, I have all kinds of problems with what's going on in that story. I don't really, to be honest with you, understand the detail of it, but this man is celebrated for faith. You know that today, Israelites still, they pause for 4 days during the year to commemorate this woman who was sacrificed as a part of their victory. Jephthah, what a story. Then there's David. I'm going to start a series next week through the life of David. So we're not going to expand on the tons of material there about David. You know there's more about David than anyone else in the Bible besides Jesus. So tons of stuff. David's story, Samuel's story, or the rest of the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions. Probably Daniel chapter 6. He defied the order of the king to cease worshiping and praying to God and continued to do as he'd always done and went up on his roof to pray. And he's thrown into the lion's den, but God provides victory for him and he lives. Verse 34, they quenched the fury of the flames. I don't know, but that could be Daniel chapter 2, 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Young Israelites who were taken as slaves into Babylonia. They were told as Nebuchadnezzar, the king, built this image to himself that they had to bow down and worship, and they refused. And they're brought before the king, and he says, I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace. And they say, I love this line, okay, God will take care of us. He'll deliver us from the fire. And then they ratchet it up. And here's the deal. They have courage in the midst of the suffering because they say, even if he doesn't deliver us, O king, we're not going to bow to you. You see the implication of that? Oh, if we could say that in our life. Like, God, this is what I want. This is what I desire. Would you take care of this need for me? But even if you don't, even if I have to walk through this valley, even if I have to endure this suffering for your name's sake, I'm going to be faithful. I'm not going to turn against you. You know how that story happens, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace. It's turned up so hot that the people who threw them in perished. But when they look down inside the furnace, there's not 3 but 4 walking around. God himself showed up to protect them from the flames, and they pull them out. They bring them out. They don't even smell like smoke. God's delivered them. He doesn't do that for us every time. He doesn't do that for us every time. A lot of times we walk through the flames of life and we struggle. But he does it this time to show us that by faith he promises ultimately, eternally, this is what he's going to do. And he's in the flame with us, walking through the fire. I love that story. Verse 34, he quenched the fury of the flames. He escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Verse 35, women received back their dead, raised to life again. 1 Kings chapter 17, Elijah, in the midst of a confrontation with King Ahab in a drought, has to flee. He's in a place called Zarephath. God's taken care of him. He's living with a widow there whose son dies. And by the power of God, he resurrects him from the dead. Or a Shulamite woman that Elisha resurrects her son from the dead. Again, not things that God does over and over and over again, but things that God does to show you that he can and that he will ultimately for everybody. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released. That's hard to grasp. Tortured, refusing to be released. But then we can think about people in modern history who've done something similar, refusing to turn on their comrades, refusing to share information, refusing to give in the midst of torturing and suffering. I see people here who will not recant their faith, who will not say they don't believe, who will not say they don't trust in God no matter the circumstance. These are people who by faith exhibit incredible courage, refusing to be released that they may gain a better resurrection. Verse 36, some faced jeers and flogging, like the prophet Jeremiah, or even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. In the New Testament, that would be Stephen in Acts 6. Or they were sawed in two. That's a bad translation. The word picture there is actually a reference to a device they used as a wheel that ratcheted, and they would tie hands and feet of the person and pull them literally apart, slowly. Just stretch them until they came apart. I can't imagine the pain and anguish, the suffering. You know, you can read this and you can think these are people of history who did great things. Wow, that's an amazing story. But you've got to put yourself, these are people like you and me. And the reason they're dealing with these incredible obstacles is because they have faith like you and I have, that God made a promise to us and that His word is good, that He is faithful and true and will bring about what He said He would. They're making a stand based upon their faith. They are incredibly courageous because they believe what you and I believe. And to me, that makes these stories just so inspirational. To think that someone was pulled in two because they wouldn't deny their belief in God. Killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. And here's why. Verse 39, their courage helped them to count on a salvation that was to come. They were commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Faith brings courage to stand in the midst of struggle. Let me ask you, just practically speaking, reflecting upon these ideas, did you have the impression when you became a Christian, or because of your faith, do you hold the idea that life's going to be a little easier? That's not the picture that's been painted here, is it? In fact, life in the immediate is a whole lot tougher because they're faithful. I mean, think about Noah, for instance. He survives the flood, right? But he's tasked with building an ark. He works for 120 years. He's saved. His sons and their wives and his wife are saved. But everybody else that he knew perished. 120 years putting his body, his life to the task of obedience to God. That's a hard calling. You can go through all of these stories and see that being faithful to God usually brought opposition. It oftentimes intensified the struggle. It brought suffering for so many, as it still does today, by the way. So many people in our world today, in places where Christianity is not acceptable, are persecuted. I met some of them a month ago at a refugee church, fleeing in part because they're suffering connected to faith. And sometimes, though, we in American Christianity and evangelical Christianity paint this idea that becoming a Christian, accepting Christ and finding salvation is such a personal thing. And it is personal. Right? It is an intimate relationship that you have with God, but it's you're joining the ranks of a kingdom that's in battle. We have an enemy that wants to destroy us, that wants to squelch out life, that wants to bring death and destruction to us. I mean, really, I'm not over dramatic in this. It's just the reality of being a Christ follower means you have an enemy. And the one who put him on the cross wants to take care of you as well. Right? So being a Christ follower doesn't mean it's going to be easier. But what a blessing. What a blessing to know that all your effort, everything that you deal with, that you endure because of your faith, the reward that you're going to receive far outweighs any struggle that you could encounter. The call to just be faithful, to stay true, to not reject that which God has said for you, brings this incredible blessing of hope. This call to go, to represent Christ, to share the good news, it's a call like these folks faced, really to battle. But here's the deal. Faith says we win. The battle's already been won. We win. Chapter 12, verses 1 through 3 really shouldn't be a new chapter. It's the conclusion of the story in chapter 11. So we read in verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, that's all the folks we've been talking about the last several weeks, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Put them aside. Think race here. You're wanting to shed yourself of everything that would slow you down. So think about your own personal life. What are the things that take you off task? What stuff distracts you? What keeps you from being focused on what God calls you to do and to be? What are the personal desires that maybe lead you in a path away from the direction that God would have? Just throw those things aside. The sin that brings momentary pleasure that satisfies maybe the body in the moment, set it aside, he says, so that you can run. Let us throw off everything that entangles us. Let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer or author of our faith, the perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The writer has told us all these stories that we too might be picked up in our faith. Remember that original audience. They've taken a hold of Jesus and they're struggling. They're suffering. Okay, their culture, Nero, all the things of the Roman Empire are pressing in on them. He says, don't let go. Don't shrink back. Don't stop. Don't become complacent with where you are, but push on to be like Christ. Throw off those things that hold you back and push towards Jesus, who went to the cross, that your faith would bring a victory. We celebrate that every week when we take communion. We got that opportunity this morning to think about this is the victory. This is the reason we have hope. This is the reason we place our faith in Christ. It's so much better than any other way to trust in Jesus to bring us life. We're going to take these elements this morning and remember that God's body was broken. His blood was shed. Christ gave his life for you that you might fix your focus on him and run all the way to victory. Would you pray with me? Father, we thank you for the opportunity this morning to serve, to sing, to give, to look at these stories of faith. And right now, Lord, to remember that it's all because of what Christ has done in offering his life as a sacrifice for us that we have hope. Father, build our faith. Help us where it is weak. Strengthen us that we might be faithful representatives of Jesus. And this morning, as we partake of these emblems, thank you for forgiving us. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.